Welcome to the Say Yes Movement podcast. Hey, hi there. How's it going?
It's going good, John. How about yourself?
It's given that it's a cloudy day and it's rainy, it's a great day. It's a fantastic
Okay.
day.
I love
Yeah.
that attitude. Well, I mean, we need the rain too, right? But yeah, it feels like night here in my house, and it's just because I rely on so much natural sunlight. So when it's not here, I really notice it, especially on the podcast. I try to get all my lights on, but this is the best I can do. My goodness.
Listen, I got an artificial light in front of me, which is pretty much always on. It's a giant ring light. But you're right. Like, I feel it. Like, in the corner, I can see the window and it's like, ooh, it's dark. Yeah, and you're right. Like, I'm looking out and it's like, it almost feels like it's winter. It's like, it's winter time and it's only 4 p.m. type of thing.
Yes. Well, let me tell you what I did yesterday. And it's, in Toronto, if you live in Toronto, it is definitely the sign that summer is over. But
Mm.
I went to the exhibition with my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law. And it was totally different than I remember it, John. It's way bigger, which is the opposite of what normally happens when you get older. Things get smaller and you go back to them and you're like, oh, this was so big when I was little. But I haven't been to the X for many, many years, but they have expanded the games and the rides and the casino, and everything was just bigger. So it was actually really, really fun. And of course, all those nostalgic smells that come at you, reminding you of times that you were at the X with people that are no longer even around. And so it was really neat to just see, people
Mm.
of all different ages, all different, and you could tell that they were going there for the nostalgia, to tell the stories of when they were here, when they were a kid. And it was really, really neat to see. And they actually had a booth that you could look through a computer, like a laptop, tablet, and then point it at different windows to see what the exhibition looked like at different years. So it
Oh,
took you
wow.
back to 1951, and you could sort of see where the Princess Gates came into play. And oh, it was actually really, really nice. So I'm feeling a little nostalgic today, and also glad that the CNE is, I've gone once this year. I'm not going twice. That's it. So I think I'm good for another 20 years.
It's funny that you say that because I think when did we go? Maybe it was last year, or the year. Well, I don't know if it was the year before. Maybe it was the year before. I think just as like things were starting to open back up. It's interesting that you say you found it bigger. I found it smaller. Like so,
Interesting.
yeah. So maybe it's different this year. I always love to watch the planes, right? Like I
Mm,
think it's on like the last week, the last couple of days of the event. They have the planes that fly overhead, right? The snowbirds and things like that. But you're right. No, it is. I remember as a kid, being taken down to the sea. Like that was, before the big Wonderland opened up. Like actually, for those who remember, there was no Wonderland at one point. The C&E was it, right? Like that's where you would go for your
CNE.
rides, and that one ride that makes you sick because you're going backwards. It's like you want to lose your lunch, especially after eating hot dogs and stuff, right? So it's interesting that you saw it.
Uh,
Yeah,
Well, and
yeah.
what really struck me, John, is these, I could see it. It was so clear, like three generations at the X together, and
Mm.
aunts, and it was women that I was noticing, but grandma was there, the aunts were there, the mom was there, the kids were there, and then I think there was even some with four generations, and they had the little kids. But I overheard someone telling the story of when they went for the first time, and how much it cost to get into the X. And I remember my mom telling me those stories, the same thing, getting really excited when the exhibition was coming, because that was, again, their form of entertainment. And, I just
Hmm.
thought, why do we need these events to tell these stories? These stories live with us at any time. And we should really find a way to extract these stories by getting more curious with the people that are still our living relatives, that have lived a full life
Mm.
and have seen things that we haven't seen. And when we get curious with our elders, let me tell you, the stories that we can uncover, it's quite spectacular. It really is.
Yeah. No, it's wow. Wow, two things popped into my head. It used to only cost a dime to get on a ride. But you're right. Like, just So, also, sorry. The other thing was the experience that new Canadians have when they go to the CNE for the first time.
Mm.
That always blows me away, right? Like this is essentially introducing new Canadians to the Canadian culture through the CNE, right? And they must be wondering, what do these guys eat, right? Because the food is just like, and it gets wilder and wilder every year. Yeah. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about how I had the Dunkin' Donut hamburger. Yeah. Anyways,
See, just the talking about the X brings nostalgia to you,
yeah.
right? And things that you tried that are odd.
It was a Krispy Kreme hamburger. So two
Yep.
Krispy Kreme donuts with the burger in the middle. Okay, anyway, but you're right. No, having those nostalgic moments where you get to go back and you reflect, right? Like how many times you're right, we don't need that, right? We don't need the CNE to bring up and elicit those emotions. Sometimes, and actually this isn't just, yes, we talk about the workplace a lot, and we talk about just being curious about people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like understanding where people come from. And one of the things I loved, I'm losing my voice this morning. One of the things I used to love was learning about people's culture, right? And how it was different. And one of the things I did in the workplace is we would have, because of business constraints and budget constraints, we would have potlucks, right? And people would bring in their own foods. But one of the things that we would do is people were bringing in their food. We kind of laid it all out on the table. I would always ask tell me about the story about that. Like how, where does that come from? What are the origins of that? And just the whole room learning about that person and that culture, right? Because everybody would always try to bring, our team was so diverse and so different. We would have things from the Middle East. We would have foods from like Southeast Asia, the Philippines, China, Thailand, like you name it. It was India and Sri Lanka and all these different places. And it was just great to like understand why that particular meal was important to them, right? Like I was I was a Portuguese guy, so I'd always bring the Portuguese chicken or the custards, and everybody's like, oh, these are amazing. And just exposing each other, right, to those moments. But really, I think, and you nailed it, right? Just being curious. And why do we wait to be curious when it's already too late?
Well, and you're bringing up the food and the potluck, and I think that's why this magic of the X, it's the activation of the smell. So, there's food that we relate to our youth, our other times. And, when you can have that dish that just immediately brings you back home or brings you back to the kitchen table with your parents as a child, whatever that dish is, and then you try to recreate it. I know my mom had this bread pudding recipe, and my sister has tried maybe 22 different recipes, and it's just slightly off. And I'm sure it's some ingredients that was in my mom's cupboard that, was unlabeled, and we'll never know what it was, but it's just a little bit off, but she keeps trying to recreate it. So that's another thing to think about is, do you have all those recipes, and are you relying on the people to make it? I know for me, at Christmas time, I make a lasagna, and all of my nieces and nephews go nuts. They won't eat lasagna any other time of the year. They're waiting for this lasagna, and honestly, like it's just sauce and cheese, but it's a special sauce, and it's a special sauce because it's a sauce that my mom used as we were kids, and it's actually really cheap Bravo sauce that you get at Giant Tiger, full of sugar. I know, but
now they know.
But you know what, John? There's this crazy story, and I don't know if we talked about this already, but Bravo stopped making the sauce. And there's a certain age group that went berserk, and it's my age group, because that was the affordable pizza or pasta sauce of our youth. And so we know what that tastes like. And so when they stopped making it, and they don't have a big marketing budget, so it's the sauce that's in the bottom of the shop, or of the shelves at the grocery store. So you have to like really dig to find it. And now it's like I said, it's at Giant Tiger. So you have to, again, go to the bottom of the shelves, but it's a really sweet, unique tasting sauce, but they stopped it for a few years. So I literally stocked up on it. So did my cousins. We all stocked up on it. We don't know how to make lasagna without it. Like, it doesn't taste the same. But why I'm bringing this up is, the smells, the food, the sitting down with people that mean something to you and getting
Mm,
curious is so, so important to activate, and remember what our purpose is. Remember that
mm,
we're not trying to do this all on our own. Before us, there was our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents. Our elders have lived their lives in order so that we can live ours. And isn't that magic? Woo.
mm. Yeah, no, 100%. You're talking about sauce, and so I live in a very affluent Italian neighborhood, right? And one
Mm.
of the things that people do at this time of the year is they do their tomato sauce, right? Like they make their own tomato sauce in their garage with the hot pot. Like it's quite the sight to see, right? And you see like their garage is like full of tomato bushels and just it's crazy. And it's interesting because yesterday I was talking to somebody about that, and we talk about traditions as well, right? Like, what are the things that you're doing that are really leaving an impact for future generations? And just going through that, right? Like, this is when we think about our elders, right? We think about our parents in terms of like I'm like my parents aren't with me anymore, right? So
Yeah.
one of the things my parents would do is around I think it's later in the fall, like the fall is typically when they would do their wine. My dad would do the wine in the garage, right? Like think of it. He would make his own
Mm.
wine in the garage, right? Like that's just what we did. And it was always as a kid I'm like, oh, this is like I would always think like this is silly, right? Like why would anybody like just go to the store and just buy it, right? And at that point it was actually less expensive to make your own wine than it was to buy it. But it was the process of being together, right? And it's the process of handing down those traditions down to the next generation, right? Luckily, my sister picked up one of the traditions, and there's this um, bread sausage that Portuguese people make called alheirras, right? I don't know if you've ever had one, Heather, but I'll have to bring you one. And there's different ways to cook it, right? Because you
Okay.
can do it on
Yum.
the barbecue and it's smoked and it's delicious. But it's got a mix of like different meats with breads, right? Like it's got your pork, it's got your it's got beef, it's got like a whole bunch of different things. Anyways, it's really, really delicious, right? It's very different. But it's how you pass on those traditions, right? Like you think about the culture, right? The culture of our families, that's what gets passed on to us.
That's right. That's right.
And that's and it's a beautiful sight. And as I'm when I'm running in the morning and I see these people in their garage like making these tomato sauce, I'm like, how cool is that? You got like two, like you said, two or three different generations all working together and creating and
100%.
building together. Because that's going back to the whole C&E thing, like that is tradition. Like that's
It's
not just
tradition.
tradition, but it's also legacy,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Legacy.
It's what our parents pass on to us that we pass on to the next generation. And we hope that, just like the bread pudding, just like your lasagna, now that you found your sauce, it's a way of passing that on. And, the one thing, it's interesting because this conversation is really kind of opening up my eyes to things. The one thing I'm always thinking about is legacy, right? So how do we leave a legacy that our future generations can hold on to and continue to grow, right? Like how do they keep moving forward with that? And the
Yeah.
only way you can do that is to participate,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Participate and create new neural pathways and
Mm.
memories for the next generation and tell those stories, not to exclude them, but to invite them in. And, we're talking about it in a family sense, but the same thing happens in the workplace. When
Mhm.
you create a culture of bonding and having conversations about different cultures and tell me about your recipe. This is how you build trust, and trust is the currency for everything that you want to do on your team. You cannot do a
Mm.
single thing, you can't get a single result without trust. You can, but it's for a very short period of time, and then that trust gets eroded and people will leave you. So if you want to be a really good leader, this is one of those things that you want to do. You want to have them tell their stories, feel seen and heard, let them be uniquely on the team in a really powerful way. I love it when people tell me a little bit about their parents. And I never ask these questions until they tell me something about their parents first, because I don't know if it's going to evoke sadness or
Mm,
anything, because if they're still with us, or, and depending, but I always love asking this question: what's the biggest lesson you learned from your mom or your dad? And that always, the
wow.
person always sort of takes this a step back, and I see their eyes sort of look up and to the left. And when that happens, I know that they're going back into their memory. They're going back and seeing exactly what's happening. And I've transported them in their mind's eye to a moment that is the most memorable moment. And you know what, John? The funniest thing, not the funniest thing, the most important thing to know is that moment is usually the smallest moment that you can think
Mm,
of. It's a hug. It's someone fell down and scraped their knee and they got a Band-Aid put on by their mom. It's, you got a tool for your dad and, he was so proud of you. It's usually a moment that's just so uniquely just a moment, and it feels like insignificant, and yet it's everything in that
mm,
moment. So,
yeah.
get curious and ask people these questions, and then you get to actually learn from their parents through that person, and that's how the legacy of your parents and our ancestors continue to live on. So I love that question, and sometimes it does get emotional, but you know what, it's good emotion. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah. Well, it's just connecting with the human, right? Like what's showing up for me, and actually, this sounds like it's a possible even takeaway today.
Hmm.
And somebody's new joining us on LinkedIn, so I just wanted to take a second and say good morning. Excited to meet you as well.
Yes.
Um,
And
the
someone
one
else
thing,
thinks it's Thursday. It's Wednesday today. Like, just
yeah,
go check your
today.
calendar. I don't want you to go to the wrong meetings. It is still Wednesday. We still do Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
And we're making Felicia hungry today. So yeah,
Yeah.
listen, no 100%. No, listen, Heather and I were on the 30-day shred. We are on a mission to get ourselves to a particular health goal by the end of the month. So yes, I can think about it, and it's funny because I could actually start smelling some of that food as you were talking about it. Because what gets activated, our memory has an incredible job of just activating certain things. It's like, oh, why am I smelling that right now? Okay, we
Yeah.
gotta stop. We gotta stop talking about food. It's too early in the morning. It's driving me nuts. So here's the thing, right? Like, why not just treat people as humans today? Let's get curious around the people that we engage with on a regular basis, right? The people that are with us, the people that are, the people that we're interacting with. What is that one thing you can do today just to learn a little bit more about them without invading their space and getting too personal? Because I think, especially in the workplace, some people want to be very protective around what they share and what they don't share. But you're right, actually, even, and I think we've talked about this as well, what's the best part of your week so far?
Yes, it's a great question.
Right? Because what you might get back as a response might surprise you. Right? And so, like, let's make today, and so today I'll do the takeaway. Um, get curious about one thing and just learn one thing you didn't know about somebody today.
Ooh, I love it.
Right? Right? So whether it's a tradition, right? A tradition in their family, a tradition that they've grown up with, like the CNE for us, right? Like, what's that one thing that you can learn about? What's that one thing that you can get curious about so you can learn more about that person and make more of that human connection? I think
And
I think that would be special because here's the thing, at some point that person is no longer going to be in your life, or they might not be, right? And
mhm.
it's interesting how you create these connections with people that end up being in your life for such a long time. One of the things, really quickly, I learned from my good friend Sultan Akif was, when he builds connections with people, he's building connections for at least a decade. Like
Mm,
he's building relationships for at least 10 years.
wow.
And if it's not going to be a 10-year relationship, then you're not it's not the right person to be in that circle, in your circle, right? Like
Ooh, that's a topic we need to explore because
I
there's so
know,
much there. My goodness. You can't just drop that with 10 seconds to go, John.
I
My
know,
goodness.
but you gotta keep coming back because then you never know what we're gonna talk about next. But yeah, no, like let's just, and what we've been talking about today is just make connection, like make a solid connection with somebody just by being curious to create new memories And Heather, you said it too, right? Creating new neural pathways to help us. It actually opens us up,
Yeah.
right? It gives us a different view on the world if we can see something from somebody else's perspective.
And if you're not sure what questions to ask, just say, I was listening to a podcast this morning and this was the call to action, and I thought I'd love to know a little bit more about you. So is there a tradition in your family? Is there something that a lesson that you've learned from someone important in your life? Could you tell me a little bit more about that? And so bridge it that way and make it really soft, a nice soft landing for the other person. And then you can, of course, tell them, come join me for listening for the podcast.
Yeah. And actually, I'm going to invite the people that are listening in right now, or anybody who's listening to the replay or the podcast that gets posted online, drop your comment. What's the one thing that you'd like to share with us, right? What's one tradition that stands out for you, or what's that one memory that you're really fond of that you're open to sharing with us? And just drop it in the chat. Listen, I go in afterwards. I know Heather does as well. We go in, we read the comments in the chat. We'd love to see that from you. So share that with us too, right? Like, you're our community. We're here to serve you, and we're here to send this message out to you. So let us know, right? Give us that one bit of information that you'd be open to sharing with us. Okay, I can't believe we're already at time, Heather. That's kind of crazy, right?
Of course.
All right. Okay, so thank you for tuning in. And just remember, when you shift your mindset, you shift your life. Wishing you all a great one. Talk to you all soon. Take care.